Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
My darlings, today I bring you something a little bit different. I'm sure you've all heard of near-death experiences, but I am here on the other end of the spectrum with you this morning. We're going to examine before birth experiences. I'm going to do this in two parts. I will bring you stories of people's memories before they were born. And in the second half of this video, I will bring you stories of people who interact with their children before their children are born. I have scoured the internet and long dead websites to find a lot of these, so references are kind of slim. But if anyone has issues with the stories, if they're yours, please let me know and I will remove this video or give you credit, which would be even better. The first one is from Desmond. There are a lot of stories of very young children that still remember what it was like before they came down here to this life. In the book, Life Before Birth, the authors Peter and Mary Harrison recount that little Desmond first spoke of his other life at the age of 3.5. He surprised his mother Dorothy one day by telling her, "You know, Mommy, before I came to be with you, I was with Auntie Ruth." He couldn't have known that his auntie had had a stillborn baby about 10 years before. She had a hard time talking about it, so the family never mentioned it. Desmond told his mom that it was warm and dark with Auntie Ruth. When asked where he was before, he replied, "I went back home, of course, the place I lived before I came to be with Auntie Ruth, where all the nice fields and all of the other little boys and girls." He mentioned that there were big people there also that took care of them, and that the children used to play games and attend school. Dorothy recounts how Desmond told her how the children used to play in pools. But when I asked him if he swam, he answered no. He explained we didn't swim because we didn't sink, and we never got wet. When we went into the water, we just floated on top, and the water just fell off of us when we got out and made its way back to the pool, and we were all dry. The water played songs for us, but not with words. When we picked up some water, it went tinkle, tinkle. Another day, Desmond told me more about heaven. As Dorothy was planting some seeds with her son, Dorothy says, "He took my breath away when he told me he used to make his own singing flowers." When I asked what he meant, he answered, "You know, flowers with music coming out of them." He explained that he and one of his friends in heaven had been taught how to make flowers. All they had to do was think of the flower stage by stage, and the flower would appear in the colors he wanted and started to play music. As Desmond got older, the stories of his home became fewer. Now he's 6 years old. He seems to have forgotten them, says his mother. But I am certain he must have had some strange experiences. Daniel. Another toddler called Daniel spoke of his experiences to his mother when he was 2.5, when he saw the sea for the first time in his life. His mother Greta said, "I thought his eyes were going to pop out of his head. He ran straight in and started dancing up and down." Then Daniel told her, "I have to go into the water to get born, Mummy. It wasn't the same as the sea, though. It was a river." Asked where that was, he replied, "You know, heaven, where all the little boys and girls live before they are born. It's where the river was." Loma. Loma Bradshaw, at 2 years old, had clear memories of being in heaven before she was born and remembers meeting Jesus. She spoke about it. First time when her grandfather died. She said, "I expect when I'm old I'll be quite glad to die," she told her mother, Margaret. "Everybody I love will be with Jesus, and I'll want to be there too." Margaret asked her where she had met him. "It was when I was in my other home before I was born," said Loma. Everyone knew it was Jesus when he came to see us. Everyone talked about him coming. Loma's father wondered if she had seen pictures of Jesus before and perhaps confused her present with an imagined past, or that she had simply dreamed about it. Loma answered, "Oh, I did see a picture of Jesus, but I like him better when I saw him really." Her father argued, "But you haven't died yet, Loma." "How could you know about heaven?" "I died the last time," she said. "When I was little, I got sick and went back to Jesus." Her father asked what Jesus was like, and Lorna's face lit up. "He was pretty," she told her father. "He had shiny eyes, and he made us all glad." A description of the spiritual world. Like our world, heaven is not one place. I recall 2 places which were on a level different from my own. Other than that, my memories are relegated to the specific city I lived in. It was set around a bay and had tall palm trees, plants, and many paths and rivers that ran alongside them. The paths were so many that I actually got lost and had to think myself back onto the right road. No one had to walk because in that world we can travel by thought. But because it is so pleasant, we almost always prefer to walk to a destination rather than simply arrive. Everything everywhere is made of light, and the colors are so intense that memories from Earth seem strangely colorless. Many people have houses, but usually we choose to live with housemates. I don't think it's because of lack of space, but rather desire for company. Plenty of people simply sleep outside. The weather is always perfect. Bugs will never bite you. Nothing gets dirty, so there's no reason to stay inside. Dark doesn't really happen, but the sky will at times turn dusky pink or purple, and that seems to suffice as nighttime. I remember being sort of tickled by it, like, "Oh, is it evening now? Who decided that?" Anyone who remembers heaven will tell you about the water. It's incredible. The way it moves, the sparkle, the transparency, the rainbow of colors. Imagine something so beautiful that even though you've seen it hundreds of years and spent whole days staring at it, its beauty is still so astonishing that looking at it while waking will actually make you stop dead in your tracks. I remember being late to meet someone because this happened to me once. Although I don't remember much about the greater cities, there were definitely places of learning. There were moving stairs, somewhat like escalators, with nothing supporting them underneath. That would take me to places on higher levels, but whenever I try to recall what I saw when I got to the top, my mind goes blank. I figure it's probably a bigger city, somewhere people go to complete tasks or learn things, because I wasn't allowed to go without a guide accompanying me. I once went there long ago to learn the violin. Before this life, I asked if I could return to the music room to learn more. They said I didn't need any new lessons, but I'm taking up the violin again in the hopes that in the next time around I can somehow convince them to let me into that dang music room again. I think this kind of training explains why some people are born with innate talent, the ability to sing, dance, write, paint, or act extremely well from a very young age, because they took lessons in spirit long before they arrived here. Remembering heaven. All my life I've remembered not only my birth and that of my twin brother, but I have also remembered very small glimpses of what I left behind. As a Christian, I realize that there is a heaven, but I clearly know what it looks like due to this amazing memory. First, the place is incredibly beautiful. I remember that there are fantastic paths to walk on, a lot of green grass, shady tree, ponds, lakes, and fountains. There are buildings that are beyond belief in terms of architecture. Also, heaven has a real atmosphere. There is a bright light, like you associate with sunny days and blue skies. There's no darkness, but somehow the atmosphere changes to a peaceful sunset kind of glow. I remember there were a lot of people there having fun, moving about, sitting on the perfect grass near the water. The houses there made our houses on earth look like nothing. Heaven is a real place, and everything that is lovely on earth is patterned after what already exists in heaven. Heaven is the original. When we go back to heaven, it is like a homecoming. I remember walking down a path with an individual to my right. We weren't talking, but he was explaining things to me that I can't recall. We came to a place where a number of people were standing around. They were all beautifully dressed, and it exuded an incredible love towards me. We were standing in front of some kind of opening that looked almost like the mouth of a cave. We were waiting for someone whom I loved very much. Finally, this person arrived, and there was a tremendous sense of peace and love associated with him. I realize now that it was Jesus Christ. He came over to me and looked into my eyes. His eyes are difficult to describe except that they radiated pure love and peace. His love is beyond what words can express. Then I noticed that there was an individual who was going to escort me into the cave-like structure. Perhaps this is the same tunnel that near-death experience people recall. I believe that we have to go through the same tunnel to be born. I remember entering this dark tunnel and being escorted by a being who also exuded love and peace. I noticed the presence of others in the tunnel also, but I could not see what they were doing. Finally, I remember looking at my small body, and the next thing I remember, I was being born. I also vividly remember that someone showed me to my mother from the right side. Strangely, there were a couple of instances where I was out of my baby body and was able to watch the entire operating room. Then I was back inside my body. Lastly, I remember lying in the incubator, and the being was still standing next to me, projecting that incredible sense of love and peace. Then this being, who must have been an angel, began to leave. I felt cold and alone. I didn't want this being to leave. I also noticed another baby, who I knew was the same one that was with me inside my mother. It was my twin brother. Through the years, I often think about this experience, and how blessed I was to have the chance to remember where I came from. This is not about a religion, but about reality. Jesus said that he was going back to heaven to prepare a place for us. There are beautiful places there already, but he is building something so awesome that we can't even begin to imagine what it looks like. Those last two descriptions seem very similar. This one is by Anonymous. I could have been an only child. As a very young child, I had always had a sense of security and well-being. I felt loved and watched over by God. I knew at a young age that I had picked my parents and my siblings, and I told this to anyone who would listen. Of course, no one did. My pre-birth environment, or heaven as I like to call it, was truly a wondrous place, filled with love, comfort, and understanding. I remember that it was once again time to go to Earth. I believe I discussed the life I would lead on Earth with someone more advanced spiritually than I. I don't remember speaking, just thinking. As I selected my life, I remember having many loving souls around me and carefully picking my parents and siblings, one after another. I've always been puzzled as to why everyone doesn't remember this. I even remember them joking about how many souls I was choosing. I'm of a family of 10, counting my parents. I remember feeling a deep love towards my family and taking comfort in the fact that these souls would be with me. If I had any idea how much aggravation most of them would have caused me, I might have decided to be an only child. There were souls with me until the day I was born. I have memories of flitting in and out of my fetus body. I believe this was allowed to get used to my physical earthly body. Then came the actual delivery. After the initial excitement and swoosh of being in a dark tunnel, suddenly I couldn't breathe. Feelings of confusion, panic, and pain enveloped my body. I felt as though I could not take this earth world. I was wondering why I had not been told of this harshness. Just when I thought it was all over, I was born. Thank God, I still remember the feelings of relief more vividly than anything else. Ever since I can remember, I've had an almost phobic reaction regarding anything touching my neck. Normal things, a scarf, a turtleneck sweater, a necklace. These things set off a physical reaction, leaving me feeling panicked and confused. Not until a conversation with my mother when I was 16 did it all come together. We were sitting at the kitchen table peeling potatoes for supper one day. Somehow we got on the subject of my delivery. She said that, of her 8 children, my delivery was the hardest. When I asked why, she said, "Oh, it was awful. The doctor was trying to deliver you, but the umbilical cord was wrapped several times around your throat." In a panic, he ran from the delivery room. The nurse ran after him, pleading for him to come back. To no avail. She came back into the room red-faced but determined. She said, "Kathleen, we are going to deliver this baby together." And they did. When my mother finished this story, I felt vindicated. Memories of my delivery flooded back to me. Panic, pain, not being able to breathe. Confirming my pre-birth and birth memories. I believe my mother's story was meant to affirm my connection to God. Someone up there is watching over me. Of this I am quite sure. The next set of stories, my darlings, are people who have encountered and had visits from their children not yet born. I have a book on this subject that I dearly love called Coming from the Light by Sarah Hinze. The first story is told in that book by Elisa. I was putting 3-year-old Johnny to bed when he asked for a bedtime story. For the past few weeks, I had been telling him of the adventures of his great-great-grandfather, a colonizer, a soldier, a community leader. As I started another story, Johnny stopped me and said, "No, tell me the story of Grandpa Robert." I was surprised. This was my grandpa. I had not told stories of him and could not imagine where he had heard his name. He had died before I'd even married. "How do you know about Grandpa Robert?" I asked. "Well, Mama," he said with reverence, "he's the one who brought me to Earth." This is One Mother's Dream from The Mystery of Pre-Birth Communication by Elizabeth Hallett. My son was born 5 months ago, and the first contact I remember happened 3 years ago when my husband and I first met and fell in love. It was during our first month together that I entered into my journal a dream where I saw our son Austin playing with his dad. The dream was very vivid, and the image of him as clear as a photograph. I wrote a physical description of him and knew what a beautiful, special little soul he is. I fell so in love with this child that for 2 years, all I could think about was getting pregnant and being able to hold him in my arms. After 2 years, and finally a commitment to be married, I became pregnant. Throughout my pregnancy, I dreamed of him, and he always looked the same golden red hair and beautiful blue eyes. And now that he's here, I get physical, tangible evidence of what I felt about him all along. Sometimes the child even conveys a message that can be of importance to the parents. Dawn and Terry met a little later in life, but agreed that they didn't want to wait before having children. Terry became pregnant on their wedding night. An ultrasound taken several months later showed that without a doubt she was carrying twins. The pregnancy was making Terry very ill, and Don worried about her health. He feared that she might lose the babies, but he was also more frightened that he might lose her as well. One night he woke up and looked towards the bedroom door. A light was shining in the hall, but he remembered that he and Terry had shut everything off before coming to bed. The light grew in brilliance as it came down the hall, then turned into the bedroom. Within the light was a young man wearing a white robe. He came and hovered next to the bed and looked at Dawn. "Dad," he said, "my sister and I have talked it over and decided she will come first. It'll be better for Mom this way. I'll come in about 2 years." Dawn turned to wake Terry, but when he turned back, the figure and the light were gone. The next day, Terry miscarried one of the babies she was carrying. The other twin suffered no trauma and was born at full term, healthy, red-haired, and a girl. 21 months later, Terry gave birth to a boy with red hair, exactly like his older sister. Here is an excerpt from Richard Dreyfuss in an interview with Barbara Walters on 2020. The conversation went back to Dreyfuss' meteoric rise to stardom with such memorable films as The Goodbye Girl, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Jaws. History had proven that such rapid success is often hard to handle. Dreyfuss was no exception. Now 50, he responded to Barbara's pointed questions with the hard-earned yet peaceful candor of one who has succumbed to addiction and overcome it. The interview revealed that Dreyfuss's first marriage had fallen casualty to his troubled years, as had some great film roles. Over the 20 years of addiction, recycling had come and gone. The turning point had occurred miraculously in a dark hour. Dreyfuss was hospitalized in an effort to detox him yet again from the grasp of drugs and alcohol. Hours passed. As he sobered all alone in the hospital room, there entered a 3-year-old girl in a pink dress and shiny black patent leather shoes. She told him, "Daddy, I can't come to you until you come to me. Please straighten out your life so I can come." And she was gone. But the pleading message of her haunting eyes was seared into Dreyfuss's memory, a constant inspiration to reorder his life so that his daughter might come. With this sacred incentive, he maintained sobriety, remarried, and prayed. Within 3 years, a daughter was born to Dreyfuss and his wife, the same girl who had come to his hospital room. The next couple of stories is from Light Hearts. The first one is from a woman named Shauna. "My husband and I have always wanted 5 children. After we reached number 5, we began to use birth control. One night, after love, I lay in bed and had a wondrous experience. I heard a voice of a little boy asking me if I would be his mother. I felt this was a soul reaching out to me. I said quietly, I'd love to. And that's when my little boy Caden and I first met. He's been a blessing for our whole family, gentle and loving. Even his birth was amazing. Thinking I might be in labor and not being able to sleep, I went downstairs and began to make a cake. All of a sudden, I felt my body pushing. I made it just into the living room. Caden was born into his father's hands. The next story by Joy. I am a nurse midwife. For about 10 years, occasionally an unborn baby of one of my patients talks to me telepathically. Most often this happens during labor to suggest some position change to make descent easier, or to tell me of a change in maternal blood pressure, maternal fever, etc. This information always proves true and often shortens labor. Occasionally, the talking happens during the prenatal office visits to tell me something affecting the mother at home I wouldn't know otherwise, such as drug abuse. The mother we talk about options from there. These communications do not happen with every baby. Seems to be for a specific purpose and ends abruptly with delivery of the baby's head, almost as if it had passed through some veil and communication is not possible for me now. Chosen by my child. I am due to give birth to our first child in July. One day last summer, I was walking my dog in a field. Suddenly, I had the sensation that someone was watching me from the sky. I was struck with the sense that someone was choosing me right in that moment to be their mother. I heard in my heart, there, her, she's the one I want to be my mother. I wrote it off as wishful thinking, since we had been unsuccessful in trying to conceive for a little while. But lo and behold, later last fall, we finally conceived, and now look at that experience as my first glimpse into the spirit of my unborn child. I feel so blessed to have had that experience. By Caitlin. The Baseball Boy. This amazing incident happened 20 years ago. I woke up at 3 a.m. and saw a vision of a small boy standing in front of my bathroom door. He looked to be about 6 to 8 years old and wearing a baseball uniform and holding a bat. I knew he was a visiting spirit and that if I blinked he would disappear, so I stared as long as possible. Then he was gone. My 2 daughters were sleeping, so because they were young and in high school, I never mentioned my experience to them. Approximately 5 years later, my oldest daughter was home from college with some friends. They were sitting in our family room talking about ghosts. My daughter, Michelle, said, "I saw a ghost a few years ago in my bedroom, about 2 to 3 a.m. He was wearing a baseball uniform and had a bat in his hand." When I heard this, I questioned her, and we traced it back to the time when I had seen the same image. Thinking about who this baseball boy might be, I had a strong feeling that he was going to be my daughter's son, and that baseball would be the clue that would let us know. She and I never forgot our joint experience over the years. She also felt that he might be a child of hers. Well, my daughter did have a son, and she decorated his room with a baseball theme. James is now 4 and signed up for T-ball team, which comes before baseball. He loves sports, especially baseball, and enjoys reading books and seeing pictures about it. We feel that James chose his mother and was watching over her for many years before he reincarnated. He made himself known to me as well because of my belief in life after life and my ability to corroborate Michelle's sightings, instead of leaving her to wonder if it was only her imagination. Only time will tell if there is another message that he brought to us in the wee hours of the night that relates to baseball. Perhaps he was a baseball player in a previous life. My daughter and I are both looking forward to the first time we see James fully clad in a baseball uniform. Jean. Pre-birth dreams and my granddaughter. During the winter-spring of 1997, I had the same dream 3 times within 4 months. In the dream, there was a little female toddler with brown curly hair that I was concerned about. I was trying to find the person who was supposed to be taking care of her. I kept asking people, "Who is this child? Shouldn't someone be watching her?" In one of the dreams, there was a man whose job it was to take care of her. He was under a car fixing it and had allowed the child to go into the street. I immediately went over and got her and admonished the man. For the rest of the dream, I was holding the little girl's hand whenever I went. In another dream, my husband was supposed to be caring for her, and he also allowed her to go into the street. Once again, I got her, and she was with me for the duration of the dream. In the third dream, I saw her repeatedly. She seemed to be wandering around alone. This time I noticed that the bottom half of her face, from far right below the nose to her chin, was covered with lace. I couldn't figure out what the lace was, but I felt that I was to accept her as she was, lace and all. Again, she stayed with me for the entire dream. When I woke up each time, I wrote the dream down and drew a picture of the child with lace on her face. I put the dreams aside, figuring the answer would come eventually. Almost 2 years later, my daughter took a pregnancy test while she was visiting our home. When she walked into the living room to tell me the results, I saw the aura of pink gingham all around her. Before she could tell me, I knew she was pregnant, and it was a girl. The father had been a young man she had been dating. They had broken up, and he was leaving that evening for California. About a month earlier, I'd done a numerology report on them both, and it stated that they were not compatible. However, the test said that if they ever had a child, it would be extraordinarily intelligent. We, of course, blew it off as just a fun thing. My daughter found a new boyfriend, and they moved in with my husband and me a month before the baby was born. He was with her through the pregnancy and the baby's birth. He even had the baby call him Daddy after she started talking. For the next 2 years, they continued to live with us while they both went to school. Guess who cared for the baby? Yup, me. When my granddaughter was 1 year old, she was just starting to get hair, and it was coming in. Curly. One day, about 6 months later, she was standing in our living room with her pacifier in her mouth. When I looked at her, it just washed over me. There she stood with her curly hair and her lace pacifier covering the bottom of her face. The child from my dreams. I got my journal and showed my husband the picture I had drawn several years earlier, and he was astounded. When her boyfriend left, my daughter and the baby moved back in with us. My husband and I went to court and now have joint custody, so as to give our granddaughter the stability she needs. So the result is, yes, I am the one who is supposed to care for this child, and I feel that my dreams were a message from God that I would be able to do it. She is now 4.5 and extraordinarily intelligent, just as the test predicted. She is a bright, happy child who prays every evening, thanking God for Jesus and all his fairies. She is a bright spot in our lives and a real blessing to the whole family. And God prepared me for her arrival by those 3 remarkable dreams. Sandra Cashin. A pre-birth angel promise. I have 2 daughters, 22 and 31 years old. When my eldest daughter was 8, an only child, I made up my mind I didn't want any more children and decided to have a tubal ligation. I had been on birth control for 8 years. I went to my doctor to make sure plans for this surgery procedure. During the examination, he found ovarian cysts. The doctor instructed me to go home, pack a bag, and check right into the hospital. The surgery was performed and everything went smoothly. 3 weeks after the operation, I was lying in bed one night when I saw a brilliant flash of light in my bedroom. I thought a car had turned around in my driveway, but when my husband walked into the room, he told me I was glowing, that my face was radiant with light. I just laughed at him. A week later, I found out that I was pregnant. I was devastated. I was so angry with God that I stopped going to church. Then one night I had a dream, and in the dream, I was in the bathroom thinking that I couldn't be pregnant, when all of a sudden a very tall man appeared. He said God had sent him to tell me that everything was going to be okay. He told me that he was my guardian angel and that his name was Jerry. He reminded me of a great Zulu warrior. My daughter was a gift from the start. She had a voice from God, even though no one else in our family can sing. I love to listen to music, and I play the radio all day. One day when my daughter was about 4 years old, I noticed that she was singing the words to the song she liked. It was so beautiful that I just cried and cried. We started to go to church again, and I enrolled her in kindergarten at 4 years of age. They told me one day that I should enroll her in a special school of the arts that was being offered at the time. I took her to the audition, and she was chosen by all 4 of the teachers who interviewed her. During class sessions, they taught her various old spiritual songs. The pastor of our church would coax her to sing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot during the praise services. The Spirit of the Lord would come into the room, and everyone, I mean everyone, would be dancing or crying. It's just proof to me that God knows what's best for us, even when we don't know it ourselves. Sharon. It's a girl. A woman I know had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. Towards the end of her final pregnancy, when she was carrying her 5th child, she became more and more anxious to have another girl. She thought about it a great deal, hoping and praying that God would grant her a second daughter. She and her husband were sleeping one night when a disturbance in the room awakened her. She awoke to see an apparition in white standing by the bed. She sat up in shock, wide awake. The presence said in a very clear voice that seemed to be female, "You can stop worrying. Your baby is a little girl." Then slowly the spirit faded and disappeared. She woke her husband and asked him if he had heard the voice. He said he had not and tried to convince her that she had had a dream, but she knew without a doubt that she had been completely awake. Eventually, she delivered a healthy baby, her second daughter. So quote this raven. My darlings, I hope you enjoyed this. It's a little bit of a departure, but I like to explore all sorts of things. If you're interested in more of this, or in near-death experiences, or if you even want to hear something different from different religions, reincarnation, or other such things, let me know in the comments. I would like to thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Ermin Case, Darren and Jennifer Daw, and Callist Enoch. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.